Honestly, sir, I don't think it's our place to interfere. She's just talking to a few cadets. Captain Eva Rostova kept her voice low, a respectful murmur meant only for the four-star general she served as aide. They stood near the grand archway of the Arlington Hall, a vast chamber draped in flags and ringing with the hearty, overlapping conversations of generations of warriors. The annual All-Services Heritage Gala was in full swing, a sea of dress uniforms, Marine blues, Army greens, Navy whites, a living tapestry of American military history. General Harmon, a man whose granite jaw and chest full of ribbons seemed carved from the very bedrock of the Marine Corps, wasn't looking at the tapestry. His gaze was fixed, like a targeting laser, on a small, quiet corner of the room where a woman who looked like someone's grandmother was holding a small audience of fresh-faced West Point cadets captive. She was small and frail-looking in a simple lavender dress, her silver hair pinned in a neat bun. She held a cup of tea in hands marked by the fine, papery wrinkles of age, yet she held it with an unshakable stillness that seemed at odds with her delicate appearance. "It is precisely my place, Captain," General Harmon countered, his voice a low rumble of authority that had cowed men far more formidable than his aide. "Stolen valor is a cancer. It disrespects every single person in this room. And that woman is telling those boys she was an operator in World War II. An operator. With the OSS, no less. It's preposterous." Eva Rostova chose her next words with the care of a sapper probing for a tripwire. Her file for the gala just listed her as a guest of the Historical Society, sir. It says she was a linguistic analyst with the State Department. It's possible the cadets are misinterpreting. She knew it was a weak defense, but the alternative was watching her boss, a man she respected despite his rigid pride, publicly humiliate an octogenarian. She had been watching the woman for the better part of an hour. There was something about her, a profound economy of motion. When she moved through the crowd, she didn't bump into anyone. People seemed to part for her unconsciously. When she stood still, she wasn't merely standing. She was occupying a space with a placid awareness that Eva, an intelligence officer herself, recognized. Her eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, didn't dart around the room. They simply took it all in, noting the exits, the security staff, the most densely packed areas. It was a habit, ingrained and subconscious, the kind of situational awareness that doesn't fade with age. General Harmon, however, saw none of this. He saw a gentle old woman spinning fanciful tales to impress children who didn't know any better. He saw a lie, and to a man like Harmon, a lie about military service was the most offensive sin imaginable. Misinterpreting? "Captain, I heard the words myself. She mentioned dropping into France." "Dropping? It's a fantasy. Women served, God bless them all. They were nurses, pilots, analysts, factory workers. They were heroes, but they weren't Jedburghs. And I will not stand by and let that sacred legacy be tarnished by senile ramblings." He straightened his uniform jacket, a gesture that signaled the end of debate. "Stay here." The general moved with the predatory grace that had defined his career. He was a force of nature in a room, his presence sucking the air out of lesser conversations as he passed. The cadets, seeing the four-star general approaching, instinctively straightened their spines and snapped to a state of near attention. The old woman, Alara Vance, simply watched him come, her expression unreadable. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea, her gaze never leaving his over the rim of the cup. Harmon arrived before the small group and offered a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Good evening, gentlemen," he boomed, his voice easily cutting through the hall's din. "I hope you're enjoying the evening." A chorus of "Yes, General," met him. He then turned his attention to Alara, his smile softening into something patronizing, the kind of look one gives a confused child. "And ma'am, I am General Harmon. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. It sounds like you have some fascinating stories." Alara inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, not deference. "They aren't stories, General. They are just memories." Her voice was soft, but it carried a strange resonance, a clarity that belied its low volume. There was no quaver, no hint of weakness. It was a voice that was accustomed to being listened to. From her position across the room, Captain Rostova felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She watched Alara's posture. She sat perfectly balanced on the small stool, her back straight but not stiff, a model of energy conservation. Her worn leather handbag was placed on the floor beside her left foot, easily accessible but out of the way. It was the little things. Things a man like Harmon, a creature of grand strategy and overt power, would never notice. He saw a frail woman. Eva saw a lifetime of disciplined control. The general continued his gentle interrogation, his tone dripping with condescension. Memories, of course. And we're all so grateful for the contributions of your generation. My own mother welded hulls at the Newport News shipyard. Every effort counted. But it's important we keep the facts straight, for the sake of these young men who will soon lead soldiers of their own. You mentioned France. He let the word hang in the air. One of the cadets, eager but naive, jumped in. Ma'am was just telling us about organizing resistance cells near Lyon. She said she was helping coordinate supply drops ahead of Operation Dragoon. It's incredible. The cadet's eyes shone with hero worship. Harmon's smile tightened. Indeed, an incredible story. Ma'am, you must have been with a fascinating organization to be involved in something like that. He was baiting her, trying to get her to say the acronym, to speak the lie aloud so he could dismantle it. Alara looked at the cadet, a flicker of something warm in her pale eyes, then turned back to the general. It was a long time ago. The work was necessary, and many people were involved. She wasn't taking the bait. Her answers were precise, evasive, and utterly calm. It was a masterclass in deflection, and Eva Rostova recognized the technique. It was the sort of verbal parrying taught in interrogation resistance courses. You don't lie. You simply refuse to give the questioner the answer they want. But General Harmon was not a man accustomed to being denied. His patience, a notoriously thin commodity, evaporated. With all due respect, ma'am, coordinating supply drops and organizing partisans in occupied territory was the work of very specific, very specialized units. It was dangerous work done by men, highly trained men. So I ask you again, what was your role? Were you a radio operator back in London, perhaps? Relaying messages? That was vital work. He was offering her an out, a chance to downgrade her story to something more believable, more palatable to his worldview. He was giving her a chance to retreat with a shred of dignity. He expected her to take it, to blush and stammer and clarify that yes, that's what she meant. He expected her to conform to the box he had built for her in his mind. Alara Vance did not take the out. She placed her teacup and saucer on a nearby table with a soft, deliberate click. The sound was tiny in the vast hall, but in the bubble of silence that had grown around them, it sounded like a gavel. She folded her hands in her lap and looked directly into General Harmon's eyes. For the first time, he saw the full, unnerving force of her gaze. It was like looking into the eyes of a hawk, ancient, intelligent, and utterly devoid of fear. "No, General," she said, her quiet voice slicing through his condescension. "I was not in London. My work was on the ground." The direct contradiction stunned Harmon into a momentary silence. He had expected compliance, not defiance. The cadets shifted their weight, sensing the friendly chat had curdled into a confrontation. The general's face hardened, the mask of politeness falling away to reveal the cold fury beneath. He was a man whose authority had been publicly challenged by a nobody, a fantasist. "On the ground," he repeated, his voice now laced with ice. "I see. Then you won't mind telling us your unit designation. If you were on the ground in France in 1944 in an operational capacity, you had a unit. What was it?" This was his checkmate. A fantasist might know the famous names, the 101st Airborne, the Rangers, but they would stumble on the specifics. They wouldn't have a unit. From across the hall, Eva Rostova saw it coming. She pulled out her secure data pad, her fingers flying across the screen. Searching archives she wasn't technically supposed to access outside of ASCEF. She had a dreadful premonition, a cold certainty that General Harmon was striding into a minefield of his own making. The old woman's calm was too perfect, her control too absolute. This was not a woman who would be easily rattled. This was a woman who had faced things far more terrifying than a pompous general at a cocktail party. Alara Vance held the general's gaze for a long moment before she answered. She wasn't searching for a memory. She was, it seemed, deciding whether he was worthy of hearing it. Finally, she spoke. "My administrative cover was with the Office of Strategic Services. Main operational attachment was to the Special Operations Executive." She paused. letting the names settle. They were the correct, high-level organizations. Harmon's expression didn't change. He was still waiting for the stumble. "That's a broad umbrella, ma'am. I'm asking for your specific team. Your unit." Alara's posture remained unchanged. Her hands stayed folded in her lap. "My detachment was designated Group F. My operational team," she said, her voice dropping almost to a whisper, yet carrying the weight of a death sentence, "was Jedburgh Team LORNA." The name meant nothing to General Harmon. It was just a jumble of words, a name he'd never heard. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Team LORNA? Ma'am, I've studied the history of the Jedburgh teams extensively. There was no Team LORNA." He turned to the cadets, as if to say, "See? This is how you expose a fraud." The teams had code names like Andy, Frederick, Giles. He was reciting the well-known teams, the ones from the history books. But Captain Rostova had stopped breathing. Her search had returned a result. A single, heavily redacted file flagged with the highest security classifications. A file that had only been declassified 18 months ago. The title of the file was short and chilling. Project Lorna. Female-led Jedburgh operations, 1944 to 1945. Her blood ran cold. The file detailed 3-person teams, just like the classic Jedburgh model. 1 American, 1 British, 1 French, but with a critical difference. The team leaders, the ones who made the first contact, who organized the networks, who bore the greatest risk, were women. Women chosen for their linguistic skills, their inconspicuous nature, and what the file called a preternatural capacity for clandestine activity. They were ghosts. Their missions were so sensitive, their existence so deeply buried, that their records had been sealed under a national security directive for 75 years. There were only 6 such teams. Team Lorna had operated near Lyon. General Harmon was still talking, his voice full of self-righteous conviction. "You see, ma'am, the details matter. The truth matters. And claiming a place among heroes you never served with is the highest form of disrespect." He was cut off by the sharp click of Captain Rostova's heels on the marble floor. She had crossed the room in seconds, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. She came to a halt beside her general and stood at a rigid brace. "Sir," she said, her voice tight and formal. "You need to stop talking. Right now." Harmon turned to her, his face a thundercloud of fury at the interruption. "Captain, what is the meaning of this?" "Sir," Eva repeated, holding up the datapad. "Jedburgh Team Lorna. Leader designated Ancolie, field name, Alara Vance. Awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, in secret, by General Donovan himself. Also awarded the Croix de Guerre avec Palme and appointed a Chevalier of the Legion of Honor by the Free French government. All awards classified until 2021." The general stared at the screen. He read the words, but his mind refused to process them. It was impossible. It went against the entire architecture of the history he knew and revered. He looked from the datapad to the old woman. Her expression hadn't changed, but he saw her differently now. The quiet demeanor was not frailty, it was control. The wrinkles around her eyes were not from age alone. They were from staring into the sun over drop zones, from sleepless nights spent memorizing codes, from looking into the faces of men she had to order to their deaths. The blood drained from General Harmon's face. The noisy hall seemed to recede, the sounds blurring into a dull roar in his ears. He was standing in front of a ghost, a legend he never knew existed. His public, condescending dismissal, his arrogant lecture on truth and honor, replayed in his mind, each word a drop of acid on his soul. He had not been defending history. He had been desecrating it. He felt a profound, bottomless shame that was so intense it was physically painful. The cadets stood frozen, their young faces a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension. They were witnessing the swift, brutal demolition of a 4-star general's pride at the hands of a woman who weighed maybe 100 pounds. Harmon's training, his entire life's code, screamed at him. When you are wrong, you make it right. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the air burning in his lungs. He slowly, deliberately, came to the position of attention. His posture, already ramrod straight, became something more, a formal declaration of respect. He looked at Alara Vance, not as a confused old woman, but as a fellow warrior, and a superior one at that. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice, the booming instrument of command, was now quiet, strained, and thick with emotion. I have never been more wrong in my life. My ignorance is inexcusable. My behavior was a disgrace. I offer you my deepest, most profound apology. The silence around them was now absolute. Everyone in the immediate vicinity had stopped talking, drawn in by the palpable drama. Alara Vance looked at the towering general, a man humbled and broken before her. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. There is no need to apologize for what you did not know, General. Our work was successful precisely because no one knew it existed. Secrecy was our shield and our greatest weapon. You were simply honoring the history that you were given. Her words were a gift of grace, an absolution he did not deserve. But she wasn't finished. She looked at the young cadets, her pale eyes holding a deep, resonant sadness. The truth is that history is filled with quiet people. The records forget us. The medals are pinned on in secret rooms. The cost is paid in memories that you can never share. The work is all that matters. Remember that. The work and the people you do it with. Then, something remarkable happened. An old man in a wheelchair, wearing the faded uniform of an army ranger from the 5th Battalion, was being pushed by his grandson. He stopped near the group, his rheumy eyes fixed on Alara. He tilted his head, listening to her voice. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Ancolie, he rasped, the name of fragile thing pulled from the depths of 75 years. Is that you? It's me. From the Marquis du Verkers. You pulled me out of a ravine. After the ambush at St. Nizier, Alara Vance's carefully controlled composure finally broke. A single tear traced a path down her wrinkled cheek. She reached out and placed her hand on the old ranger's. I remember, Sergeant. I remember every 1 inch. The dam of General Harmon's composure burst. This was no longer about a classified file on a screen. This was living history, a connection forged in the fires of a forgotten battlefield right here in front of him. He was in the presence of greatness, and he had treated it like a cheap trinket. He took a half-step back, creating a space between them. His movements were stiff, formal. Then, in the center of the crowded hall, 4-star Marine Corps General Harmon executed the sharpest, most respectful salute of his entire life. It was not a gesture for a civilian. It was a salute to a soldier, a salute of profound respect from one warrior to another. The salute held, crisp and unwavering. The cadets, understanding now, instantly followed their general's lead, their own salutes snapping into place. Captain Eva Rostova, tears welling in her own eyes, rendered her own salute. Soon, other service members nearby, seeing a 4-star general saluting an old woman in a lavender dress, began to understand. A ripple of motion spread through the room. Officers and enlisted, young and old, from every branch of the armed forces, turned and rendered honors. The lively chatter of the gala died away, replaced by a profound, reverent silence, broken only by the soft weeping of an old ranger who had just found the ghost who saved his life. Alara Vance, Jedburgh Team leader, sat on her stool, a quiet island in a sea of salutes, her hand still resting on her long-lost comrades. Finally seen, finally home.